Hey everybody, welcome back to Down Home Dietitian. Today we're doing another gardening video and I am so excited because it is seed starting day. Seed starting day is so much fun because it means that the garden season is just about here. That spring is coming, sunshine is coming, and I'm so excited to get to grow and eat fresh food from my garden again. So I'm very excited to share this with you guys today. I'm going to be starting seeds out here. This is my enclosed front porch, which doubles as an awesome greenhouse. It's on the south side of our house. It gets a lot of sun, and I've started my seeds in here for the last couple of years, and it's worked really well. This year, though, I have actually, you probably can hear my cats. They are very, very adamant micromanagers, and they have a really hard time allowing me to do any kind of work without their supervision. So I apologize if you hear them scratching on the door and meowing, but it is what it is. This year, I have decided that I'm really ready to invest in some more seed starting kind of equipment or some things that are going to make the process go smoother and have a little bit more success and possibly more yield. The way I've been doing it is perfectly fine, and I've grown lots of food that way. So if you're a beginner, that is completely fine. We're going to talk about completely beginner, basic seed starting, all the way up to this year. I'm having more of a involved setup with some grow lights and a rack and some bottom watering trays that I'm very excited about. I'm going to explain it all to you. But the first thing I need to do is clean up this room, because as you can tell, it has become just a catch-all for all of my seed starting stuff as I bought it, my soil, and other miscellaneous items. So I'm going to tidy this room up a little bit, and then we'll get started and get into the video and teach you how to start your seeds and grow some food this year. Okay, so I finished cleaning up this side of the room here. We're gonna start some seeds and then I can finish the rest. And we're gonna talk a little bit today about starting seeds. Do I have to? How do I do it? How do I know what to start it in? And we're just gonna kind of cover the basics. The first thing is determining what you're gonna plant and what you're gonna grow it in, what's its final destination as far as raised beds, planting in the garden, etc. If you haven't kind of figured that stuff out, take a peek at my Considerations for Beginner Gardeners video. I'll link that in the description below, and that will get you started with your very first step as far as what am I going to buy, what am I going to grow, where am I going to grow it, and where do I get my seeds. This is the next step of, okay, you got your seeds. Sometimes you can start seeds in advance. You can plant things in small containers indoors before your frost season has ended. So in my case, my last estimated frost date in my area in Western Washington here is usually somewhere around May 6th. So if I were to plant frost tender plants outside right now, they would die when it gets too cold at night. But certain things have a long enough growing season or take a long enough time to start producing fruit that if I wait all the way until after my last frost date to plant things outside, I'm not going to get very much yield from that plant because it's going to take it quite a while to get to the point where it's mature and it's producing fruit, and then it may only have a short time to produce me fruit from there. Now that being said, you absolutely do not have to start seeds indoors. I know many, many gardeners, even here in Western Washington or places that have shorter growing seasons, that do not start their seeds indoors. They plant even as late as June and still get harvests. I do know that at that point, sometimes you might want to go buy some starts from the store, and that will kind of give you a little jump as far as the schedule on making sure that you get your plants to maturation to get you enough fruit and vegetables before your frost comes back again in the fall. In the meantime, if you want to start seeds indoors, it can be, first of all, a really fun way to just get your hands in some dirt a little sooner, especially as the sun finally starts to come back. You can see it's actually here. And you can get things going so that you can start getting fresh food sooner out of your garden. So it's really, really fun. You certainly don't have to, but it can extend your season and get you a little bit more out of your garden. So now the next question is, what do we start seeds in? And I have here some examples of things that you can start seeds in. The really cool thing is, seeds are not all that picky as far as what they're in. I have used old cottage cheese or sour cream containers before. You just need to drill some holes in there to let the water drain out. So anything you use has to have some holes in the bottom so that any extra moisture can drain out of the bottom. Otherwise, it'll rot the roots or the seed if it stays too moist. So I've used old containers from the store. These are peat pots that you can buy, and they are made of a biodegradable material, so you can actually plant the whole pot into your final destination garden, and the whole thing will decompose, and so they're kind of a nice sustainable solution. That being said, I have personally had some trouble with these. They do, especially as you're starting seeds, tend to dry out a little faster than, like, say, a plastic container that would just hold a little bit more moisture in. And so I had and this is partly just one of my personal weaknesses as a gardener, I am not a super consistent pot waterer. And so it's common that they may dry out on me, or they may go a couple of days without me actually watering them, which, yes, is my problem. But just be aware, these peat pots are going to dry out a little bit faster than like a plastic pot. I have also had a hard time getting these with certain plants to actually decompose, and so when I've planted them, the roots have actually had a hard time like getting through this pot to establish in my garden. So I really don't prefer these, and I really don't use them anymore, but they are an option. You can also use, I've seen several like YouTube gardeners say that they use like red Solo cups, and they just poke holes in the bottom of those. You can grow in those. And then from anytime you buy a start at the store, it's going to come in a container that can be reused. And I have about a gajillion of these in every shape and size. And I've accumulated tons of them myself. My parents have given me a whole bunch. So I don't know that I'll ever need to purchase anything to start a seed in again, ever again. These are like, I think they're called cell trays. They have several different cells that you can plant in. These are pretty small. There's some slightly bigger ones that are individual like this. And then of course there's the much bigger ones, and there's round ones. And I have these all the way up to big tree pots that I've been given. So any of these can work great. Today, I'm going to be planting several of my seeds, and mostly I'm going to be using these little guys. I like the square shape because they fit together really nicely on a shelf or in a tray, and this year I'm going to be starting with some bottom watering, and I'm going to explain what that is here in a little bit, but they are going to fit really nicely in my bottom watering trays as opposed to like the round ones that would have a lot of space in between. And these are big enough that I probably won't have to repot things out of here. Like my plants are probably not going to outgrow this little pot before it's time for me to put it out in the garden. Whereas if I started them in these little cells, probably in a few weeks they would be a little bit too big for these cells, and I'd probably have to repot them into something bigger anyway, and I'd rather not create extra work for myself. So I'm going to be starting most of my seeds today in these little guys. Okay, so once you start your seeds, where are you going to put them? So I'm going to be growing mine, like I said, out here in my enclosed porch. I purchased this rack off of Amazon. I'll link it down in the description below if you want to find it. It's a 6-tier rack that can be split apart into 3 tiers. And I just put it together and it looks like it's going to work perfectly. I'm really excited about it. But as far as where to grow your things, you do not have to have a greenhouse. You do not have to have a rack. You can have a nice sunny window. If you're growing by a window, one of the things you'll want to make sure is that your little pots have soil most of the way to the top and that they are as close to the window as you can get them, and that you keep an eye on them and rotate them every so often. They're going to grow and reach towards the sun. So if they're in a windowsill and the sun is always coming from the side, they're going to grow very much leaning towards the side, and we want them to be nice and sturdy and not to be too leggy, they call it, when it grows really long and kind of weak, reaching for the sun. So if you can rotate it, that will help. But the most direct amount of sunlight you can give them, so putting them in like a south-facing window is a great idea. This one is super broken. I probably will not use this one. So you're also going to want to look at your seed packets and find out which seeds are good candidates for being started a little early. So I've got a few of my seed packets here from Territorial, and you can see some of them, like these Blue Lake pole beans. These are some of my green beans. It says that sowing indoors is not recommended. I don't know if you'll be able to see that or not. There you go. These early jalapenos are going to be some peppers that I'm hoping, I have this dream to grow everything that I need to make my homemade salsa. We'll see if this year is the year. So this, when you look at sowing indoors, it says to start the seeds 8 to 10 weeks before you're ready to transplant them out into your garden. Peppers are a little bit tough to grow here in Western Washington. I've had a hard time with them because we just don't get enough heat. So I'm hoping that with my new grow light setup, I'll be able to actually get these to germinate. I've never actually gotten a pepper plant to germinate before, so we will see. And then this last one, these are watermelon seeds. This is the first time I've ever tried to grow a watermelon. My husband really, really likes them, so I hope that they grow and they taste delicious. So these ones say to start seeds 3 weeks before the transplant date. So it's too early for me to start these right now. They will probably outgrow their pot or get really unhappy in their little pots if I do them too soon. So I need to set these aside and make a little note to myself to start these seeds in about 3 or 4 weeks. Other seeds I'm going to be starting today are a lot of my greens. I'm not going to plant them all. Greens are something that you might want to do something called succession sowing, which means that you plant a few and then a week or two later you plant some more and you just repeat that process, because as they're ready, you'll have plants ready at different times so that you can continue having greens throughout the summer. So I'm going to start some of these as microgreens, which are when you plant the greens really, really thickly in a solid tray, and then when they grow just real small, then you kind of mow them down and you can use them just like you would with regular greens on a salad or something like a salad or a sandwich or something like that. But they grow really, really, really quickly because you're not waiting for the plant to get to full maturity. And I have a boatload of green seeds that I just overbuy. So I am excited to try to burn through some of these with some microgreens this year, and I can be eating greens. Typically, you can be eating from planting to microgreen stage within 8 to 16 days. So that should be coming up really soon. I mentioned I'm going to be starting peppers. I have, these are some leftover bell pepper seeds. I'm going to be starting my tomatoes. I'm going to be starting some broccoli and some leeks, cucumbers. I've got, cherry tomatoes and beef steaks. I'm going to be starting some sunflowers I'm going to grow this year. And I'm going to try to get basil and chamomile to grow. Those are two things. Basil, chamomile, and peppers are three things that I have not had a lot of success with in past years, but I'm excited to try with my new seed starting setup and see if the grow lights and the bottom watering help them at all, and see if I can actually get those to go. Okay, so typically what I do when I'm starting my seeds is I buy some potting soil with some fertilizer included, or I will mix up some of my own compost into some potting soil to plant my starts in. I usually like to put it in containers like this, some large buckets, so I can just scoop out of it. I just find it easier. And here we've got, this is some regular potting soil and some organic. Now, I don't plant all of my seeds in organic soil. This year I have purchased organic potting soil for my greens. And that's because greens are one of the things that tend to absorb more of the non-organic matter or chemicals, pesticides that might be put on them, and more of it makes its way into the part of the plant that we actually eat. So for budget reasons, I am prioritizing organic potting soil because it is a little bit more expensive for my greens, and using non-organic for the rest of my plants. Okay, so literally what I do to get some soil into my little pots, I get these in buckets and I just fill them up, and you want them to be pretty full, just like that. Okay, so in this little pot, I'm going to be planting some of my non-microgreen spinach. So I want to get a nice big full spinach plant going. And I've got my spinach seeds here. They are little bitty tiny. To find out how deep to plant your seeds, you want to check the back of your seed packet. It will tell you how deep the seed needs to go. A good rule of thumb that I heard though was that it should be twice the width of the seed. So this seed is itty bitty tiny, as most green seeds are, and so we're actually just gonna like poke that sucker down, pinch a little soil over it, and give it a little pat, and that's literally it. Some of the bigger seeds, like for example, peas are like a little kind of dehydrated pea. Those are bigger, they're about 1/2 inch wide maybe, maybe a little less. So those maybe go down like 3/4 inch or an inch. So, but check your seed packets, they'll tell you how deep to go. And you really want to make sure once you've planted a seed that you label it, because no matter how much you think you're going to remember what you planted there, you are not. Unless you're only planting a couple of things. If you're anything like me, you will forget. So I found these awesome little plastic tags that are, I believe, reusable, and the ink is supposed to not wash off in our deluge of rain that we get here in Western Washington. I really hope that ends up being true. I will link these in the description down below, but I got a whole bunch of these. I have used popsicle sticks in the past. I've heard of people using old Venetian blinds and cutting them up and writing on them with permanent marker. You can really get creative. You don't have to get anything fancy to mark your seeds. Just something that's going to stick in there, be kind of sturdy and not rot, and let you know what you've got where. All right, so there we go. There's my first little spinach. For my microgreens, I have a tray instead of individual pots. This tray has some little holes in the bottom, and I'm going to fill this whole tray up with soil. So, sowing microgreens is just about the easiest thing you could possibly grow. Microgreens grow so quickly, so easily. I'm going to use a whole bunch of different green seeds. You can use a spring mix, you can use spinach, you can use lettuce or any other type of green that you would normally eat. I just have a whole bunch of seeds, I think I showed you earlier, that I just overbuy. So I'm gonna just toss a bunch in here. And the really neat thing is, it doesn't matter how far apart they are, you don't even really have to cover them. The green seeds are so small, we're just gonna sprinkle them pretty densely across the top of this. So I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna use up several of these old seed packets because you can sow these really, really thickly and still get a good result. In fact, I think it's better. We've got all of those seeds in here. Because they're green seeds, they don't have to be covered very deeply at all. So I'm just gonna get a little bit of soil and kind of dust it on top. I'm really not gonna try to cover these seeds. And it's really not that exact of a science. Microgreens are pretty forgiving. So I'm just gonna kind of lightly spread this out. Just gently pat it. You don't wanna like press it down or anything, but just kind of, yeah. Okay, so there we go. We've planted a whole tray of microgreens, and these should be edible within just, no more than a couple of weeks. So I'm trying bottom watering this year. I mentioned that earlier. So these are the trays I'm using for bottom watering. These are just some hard plastic trays with no holes in the bottom. You put water in the bottom of this tray, standing water, and because there's no holes, it's not going to drain out. And that will seep into your plants. Remember that each of your pots that you planted in should have at least one hole at the bottom for drainage or to allow moisture to seep up into the plant. And the reason that I'm trying this year, in the past I've only ever watered from the top. I had a watering can, it worked just fine. You can absolutely do that. For one thing, my watering can is a little bit aggressive. So for these little seedlings, I just felt like it was possibly washing my little seeds away, or just a little hefty for my little baby seedlings. It works great for established plants. So that was one thing. But the other thing, as I mentioned, I'm not a good waterer, admittedly. At the very first couple weeks of the season, I'm great because I'm extremely joyous about the fact that I'm growing things again. After that, the excitement peters out, let's all be honest. And then I sometimes forget to be consistent with watering. So keeping water in these trays standing, you can check it. You should still, I'm going to try to check it daily just to make sure, but then they'll probably be able to go a couple of days without having water added to them. So if I miss a day, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And then also, from what I've heard, I've never tried this before, so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens, but having the water in the bottom helps the plants, the little seedlings, to develop their roots all the way to the bottom because they're reaching for that soil. So as the water, So as the water kind of seeps up into the plant, into the soil, the plant's roots are going to reach down for it. So your plant is going to have a more established root system by the time it gets transplanted out into the garden, which is a great thing. The more roots it has, the more nutrition it can get, the more water it can absorb, and the better it'll probably do. So I am trying this new for the first time this year. In the past, I have kept these. I have not had a grow rack. I've not had grow lights, which my grow lights that I bought are right here. I'm going to set them up here in just a minute. I got these on Amazon. I'll link everything down below. And they had really amazing reviews, and I think a friend of mine has them too. They have timers, so I can set them for daylight hours, turn them off at night. It's really important that if you do use a grow light, that your plants get a little break, because it takes time. I think I read somewhere, I heard they need time to photosynthesize is what they do when the lights are off. Don't quote me on that. I just read that somewhere a couple of days ago. But, so I'm going to set up my grow lights. I'll show you guys what that looks like when I have them all set up. But in the past, I want to make sure you guys know, I have never used a grow light. I've never used a bottom watering tray. I have used mostly leftover sour cream containers to grow in with a box of potting soil and my seeds. And that was literally it. I set them up in these windows on this table, and I would just rotate them and water them every couple of days. And I've grown a ton of food that way. So if you're just starting, absolutely do that. I waited a couple of years of consistent gardening to finally convince myself that yes, the gardening bug has bitten me and it's sticking. I'm going to be a gardener for the rest of my life. So I decided to go ahead and invest in some things that are going to make it easier and help me grow more food faster. But you absolutely do not have to in order to be a successful gardener. So set those up there. And I'm going to get these grow lights set up. All right, so I've got my grow lights up. They're looking pretty good, but the last thing I need to do here is just make sure that my bottom watering trays are all full and that the soil is moist. And that's the thing for your seedlings. Just make sure that your soil is damp. You don't need it to be or want it to be sopping wet, but you don't want it to get dry and dusty either. So just come check it. Give it a little push or pinch a little bit and keep some moisture on them, keep some light on them, and be patient. You will have green things growing in just a matter of a couple of weeks, and you can get going with gardening. Best of luck with your seedlings. Let me know if you have any other questions in the comments down below. Like this video if you like it, subscribe if you want to see more, and don't forget, healthy doesn't have to be hard.